Au reis, veuillez vous lever. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia is now in session. L'audience du tribunal pénal international pour l'ex-Yougoslavie est ouverte. Please be seated.
Good afternoon to everyone. Madam Registrar, would you please call the case?
Good afternoon, Jonas. Good afternoon, everyone in and around the courtroom. This is case ITO 36090, the prosecutor versus Jovica Stanišić and Branko Simatović.
Thank you, Madam Registrar. Could I have the appearances? Prosecution first.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. My name is Dermot Groom, and also representing the prosecution here today is Doris Briemar-Metz, Amir Zech, and we are assisted by Thomas Logel.
Thank you, Mr. Groom, for the Stanišić defense.
Your Honor, Geert-Jan Knops, myself, and assisted by co-counsel Mr. Wayne Jordash and legal assistants Ms. Anne-Marie Verwiel, Ms. Amy Walsh, and Ms. Rima Dijkstra.
Thank you, Mr. Knops. The Simatović defense.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. My name is Zoran Jovanovic, attorney, and today, together with Vladimir Domazet and Mrs. Ingrid Mongen, we represent the accused, Branko Simatović, as defense counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jovanovic. Could you just verify, Mr. Simatović, that you can hear me in a language you understand? The microphone.
Microphone, please.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Simatović. On our agenda today is the opening statement to be delivered by the prosecution. But before we can move to that, we first have to pay attention to the fact that Mr. Stanišić is not present in court. Mr. Knops, we have received a form in which we find a report from the NU about the non-attendance in court. There is also a form absence from court due to illness, in which it appears that Mr. Stanišić says that he's unable to attend court proceedings on this date due to illness, that he has discussed the matter with counsel, and that he has not waived his right to be present. Now, we had some confusion last time, but this time the empty box remains empty, from what I understand. Then we have received the observations by the principal officer and the undue medical service and finally we have received a report by Dr. Eekhoff, reporting medical officer. These documents have been filed this morning. We find on these forms, Mr. Knops, apart from the expression of Mr. Stanišić that he feels not well enough to attend court, also that he does not want to follow the proceedings through a video link. are you informed about the reasons why Mr. Stanišić doesn't want to go to the video link room and follow the proceedings from there? Is there anything with the technicalities of that, or does he have any difficulties in moving to that place? Could you inform us about the reasons?
Your Honor, the defense would later on would like to submit a formal application to the court, but now that the court has invited the defense to comment on this aspect, we can inform the court that both Mr. Jordash and I went to see the defendant this morning, just before the medical examination, and we were informed that Mr. Stanišić is not able to participate at this video link conference purely based on his mental condition. So it has nothing to do with the technicalities, but purely on the basis of his mental stage at this moment. And to this extent, we have just filed courtesy copies to the prosecution of the report of Dr. Petrovic of the 10th of May, which was referred to in the first report of Dr. Eekhoff of 11th of May. And if the legal officer is so kind to distribute the copies to the justices, we find support in this report for this conclusion that Mr. Stanišić is not able to participate, apart from physical aspects, is not able to participate on the basis of his mental condition. And we believe that this support is also reaffirmed by the report today filed by Dr. Eekhoff and the accompanying report of the, I believe, the medical service, column 4A. So, in sum, it's the position of the defense that Mr. Stanišić is mentally not able to participate during any alternative, namely the video link conference, apart from the fact that he is not able to be transported at all to the court, according to the report of Dr. Eekhoff. If the Honours wish me to continue, we can also wait for the moment to submit a formal application to the court after potentially hearing Dr. Eekhoff on this matter.
Mr. Knoops, we will have an opportunity to put further questions to Dr. Eekhoff, but Dr. Eekhoff comes to a different conclusion, that Mr. Stanišić is fit enough to participate in proceedings through a video link. Because you referred to apparently someone who says, on the one hand, I confirm that he has no observable symptoms with which I can judge whether or not he's too unwell to attend court, and at the same time gives a expectation of that it will be different in one day. It's not easy to understand how you could establish one and conclude the other. but reference is made to the report of the reporting medical officer, who confirms that there's still a depression so therefore I think we should first of all consider whether we have any additional questions to be put to Dr. Eekhoff. Then after that you can make your submission, and finally then the chamber will decide whether and how to proceed. In order to put any further questions to Dr. Eekhoff, I'd like to establish the video link with the UN Detention Unit. Madam Registrar. Dr. Eekhoff, I can see you at this moment. Can you see me? I cannot hear you yet, but it might be that I have to move.
No, I think I forgot to push on the mute.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I now can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly.
Yes. We received a report dated the 9th of June and I just briefly read the conclusions. You come to the conclusion that Mr. Stanišić is not fit to be transported, that he's not fit to sit for more than 10 minutes, that he is fit enough to participate in proceedings if sitting is limited to 10 minutes, and that he's fit enough to participate in proceedings up to 1 hour in the bed that has been installed in the video teleconference room. I would like to give an opportunity to the parties to ask for additional information, and it may well be that we then would still have some additional questions for you as well. Mr. Groom, do you have any further questions?
Just a couple of brief questions, Your Honor.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Eekhoff. The first question that I'd like to ask you is in paragraph 5 of the report that you drafted today, the 9th of June, you say that he, meaning Mr. Stanišić, declined the offer by Dr. Falke to consult a psychiatrist, end quote. Do I take it from that Mr. Stanišić was offered an opportunity to meet with someone who could discuss his mental state, but that he declined such an offer?
That is true. He declined it with a reason that he wasn't prepared to tell all his story and all his problems to a new psychiatrist.
Now, you've heard Mr. Knops say that the sole reason for Mr. Stanišić not being here today is because of his mental state as he perceives it himself. Having heard that, does that change your opinion with respect to your first conclusion, he is not fit to be transported?
He's not fit to be transported on somatic grounds, not on psychiatric grounds.
But now having heard Mr. Knops say that Mr. Stanišić is not putting forward any somatic grounds for his inability to be present here, does that change your opinion as to whether he could be transported here if he chose to come to court?
No, because he still has his somatic problems.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Knops.
By the way, this was only mentioned in reference to the video link conference. Prosecution was summarizing the defense comments, I think, in a different context. Dr. Eekhoff, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As you may remember, last week we were questioning you on the same subject, namely the underlying basis of your own observation that there are, in your view, no evident psychiatric reasons preventing him from participating in the proceedings. Was after Tuesday, was there a new psychiatric evaluation conducted by Dr. Petrovic?
As far as I know, no.
I have difficulties in hearing you, Dr. Eekhoff. Is there...
Oh, I get a bit nearer to the microphone. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's fine now. Please proceed.
I'll do my best.
So, Dr. Eekhoff, that means that the foundation of the report, also of 9th of June, is lying in the report of Dr. Petrovic of the 10th of May. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and my own observation.
Yes. In the meantime, the defense was able to retrieve a copy of the report of Dr. Petrovic of the 10th of May, which is now in possession of the justices and the prosecution. And in the second paragraph of this report, in line 9, it's said his intellectual efficiency is fluctuating, same as his overall participation. Are you familiar with this comment of Dr. Petrovic?
I am.
Yeah. And you agree with this?
Not completely. When I talk to him, he's able to discuss his illness. Of course, I do not discuss the case, but his state of his illness and his complaints, where he's very well able to discuss it. But as I stated in my report, I'm not a psychiatrist. But as far as I can see it, as a general practitioner who has training in psychiatry, I think that he's able to follow the proceedings.
But in your previous report, you state every time that the psychological condition is unchanged, and in doing that, you refer to the report of Dr. Petrovic.
Yes.
So, actually, now that Dr. Petrovic is saying that his intellectual efficiency to participate is fluctuating, as same as his overall participation, isn't it so that this isn't changed at all?
Sorry, I do not understand the question. What has not changed?
His intellectual efficiency is fluctuating as the same as his overall participation.
It is in the meetings I've had with Mr. Stanišić, it was not the impression I had. Of course, his state of mind is fluctuating, but there's difference between being depressed as a state of mind and depression as illness.
Dr. Petrovic is also writing in the first paragraph that his depressiveness and apathy has become permanent.
That is not completely my observations.
But you do refer to her report, and in the subsequent reports you say that his psychological stage has been unchanged.
Yes.
So you agree with me that the report of Dr. Petrovic is at this moment the only foundation to have any grasp as to his psychological situation?
No, it is as a GP, and I have to base my opinion on reports of specialists, but also on my own observations and on diagnoses which I make.
Yeah. Now today, for the first time in your reporting system, you say that, in your opinion, a report by Dr. de Man on the present psychological and psychiatric state would provide us with an expert view and advice.
Yes.
What is the reason that you make this suggestion now?
The fact, the suggestion, I talked about the man last time. In the report I mentioned Dr. Man on the last report, on the previous report, I'm sorry. And at this moment, as there's a difference in opinion partly between Mr. Stanišić and me, and as you say, Dr. Petrovic, over his state of mind, that's why I'd suggested it would be a good idea to have an expert give his opinion.
So this is also based on the fact that you're not entirely sure whether there is indeed any psychiatric reason preventing him from participating in the proceedings.
It's to exclude that there would be psychiatric reason excluded him from the proceedings. It is no more, even if we know the diagnosis, even if we are quite sure in our profession to seek advice from specialists.
Right. The observation that Mr. Stanišić is fit enough to participate in the proceedings up to 1 hour in the bed that has been installed in the VTC room, is it correct that the term fit in this context is used in the context of somatic reasons?
Somatic and psychological, psychiatric reasons.
Now, you just said that to exclude any possibility that Mr. Stanišić is not able to participate in proceedings on mental reasons. Is it your opinion that any further proceedings should be based on such a report?
If the report is made and as suggested, then that will be a base to continue or to install treatment or to change the treatment.
Now, has there been any psychotherapeutic treatment of Mr. Stanišić since the 11th of May?
It has been offered, but he has refused.
Well, you just said that Dr. Falk offered to consult a psychiatrist.
No, it was for him to consult. Offered him a consultation with a psychiatrist.
Yeah. But I'm speaking about a treatment. Was there any treatment?
Well, as it was a treating psychiatrist.
But Dr. Petrovic left, I believe, shortly after Mr. Stanišić arrived. Is that correct?
That's correct, and she will not be back to the end of the month. That's why Dr. Falk offered to consult for treatment as a treating doctor, another psychiatrist.
And when was this offer made?
Last week.
Last week. So we can conclude that since the departure of Dr. Petrovic until this offer, there was no treatment of Mr. Stanišić in a psychotherapeutic sense. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And do you agree with the view that Dr. de Man, being aware of the background and history of the case, would be the best suitable person to consult or to ask to file a report?
I think he would be the best man to file a report and to give advice.
Yeah. And can you understand the reason why Mr. Stanišić is, in this stage, from his perspective, is preferring somebody who knows his story already instead of having a new psychiatric evaluation by a new specialist? Can you understand that reason?
I understand it fully.
Yeah. Dr. Eekhoff, sorry?
What I was saying, he was offered a treating psychiatrist, not an evaluation.
Okay.
That's last week.
Dr. Eekhoff, this morning we were informed that the medication changed of Mr. Stanišić. Is that true?
Yeah, that is correct. That is regarding his colitis.
Yeah.
It was done in...
Because we read in your report of the 9th of June that the colitis showed some signs of inflammation.
Yes. We monitor him so closely that the least sign of change, Dr. Falk consulted Dr. Casimir, and together they decided to change the medication.
So based on this inflammation, is it fair to say that his somatic situation also increased?
Well, His well-being has not changed much. The general condition hasn't changed much. What we're doing now is reacting on the earliest signs of any coming complications.
We were informed that Mr. Stanišić is now being given the medication tramadol. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that akin to some kind of a morphine?
No, it is not. It's not an opioid. It's related, but it is in Holland not under the group of opium and does not have the same effects on the mind.
No. Well, we were informed that this medication does affect the state of mind, the level of concentration, and the ability to use intellectual capacities. Do you agree with that?
Why, it is possible that it does, like a lot of other medication. But
So-
not the way an opiate would do it.
No. So it cannot be excluded that the change of medication and the effects of this medication could be of influence on his mental state of mind.
Well, it cannot be excluded completely, no.
We were also informed that the bleeding of Mr. Stanišić restarted, which was evidenced by the samples of his urine. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Stanišić, no, we're talking about two different bleedings. The bleeding in his urine is continuous. We only monitor the quantity of it. And the other bleeding he spoke about is from the colitis on which was reacted as soon as known.
Yeah. My last question, Dr. Ikhoff, is the formula which is attached to your report, which is titled Undue Medical Service Questions 1, 2, 4 and 5. It was answered in regards to column 4A. Including today, I assessed that he will require 1 day absence before he should be fit to attend court once more. Have you noticed?
Yes.
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 Was this approved by you?
It was approved by me. Yeah.
So actually you're saying that for today Mr. Stanišić is not fit to attend court?
That's the benefit of the doubt which we have as treating doctors.
Right. But the term fit, is this mentioned here or used here in a somatic, a mental or somatic and or mental sense?
Fitness, a medical word, is always somatic and mental.
So you're actually saying that also mentally for today Mr. Stanišić cannot attend court. Is that correct?
Why in total, the total is not able to be in court.
Thank you. Your final advice?
Until he's been seen by Dr. Falk.
Yeah.
That's a bit the idea.
And does this also include the video link conference for today?
Yes, yes.
And your ultimate advice to the parties in this courtroom today is that preferably a further psychiatric evaluation by Dr. de Man should be conducted.
Mr. Knoos. Mr. Knoos.
Yes.
Dr. Ikhoff does not have to give any advice to the parties in this court. He can give his opinion. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Please proceed.
I have no further questions. Look to my way of questions. No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. It was not that Dr. Ikhoff could not give advice, but you asked him to invite him to advise to all the parties in this court, and that's of court. It's for the chamber to decide. So any advice should be addressed to the chamber and to no one else. Dr. Ikhoff, I have a few questions for you. You said that you considered that Mr. Stanišić was not able to attend court. That, I would say, already follows from your observation that he's not fit to be transported. I might have questions on that at a later stage. But then Mr. Knoops asked you whether that would also be true for attending court through the video link. And I think you answered in the affirmative. Now, in your report of this morning, I read that Mr. Stanišić is fit enough to participate in proceedings up to 1 hour in bed in the VTC room. I have some difficulties in reconciling what you just said and what I find in the report that was given this morning. Could you help me out?
Well, when I visited Mr. Stanišić, I made my own conclusion. I observed him, I talked with him, and my report is based on that fact. As a doctor, I say if somebody reports ill, a further assessment is necessary, and I told Mr. Knoops that until then, as a treating doctor, the patient has the benefit of the doubt. I do not have new information which would change my initial report. That's what I said. Maybe not a real legal answer, but...
No, apart from a legal answer, I do not fully understand the answer. That's my problem. This morning you said he's able to
Yes.
follow the proceedings through a video link.
Yes.
And
he reported ill after that.
he reported ill after that, and you say because he reported ill, I have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, based on my report, he is fit to sit in a video teleconference room.
Did you establish any change since you have written this report this morning?
No. No.
So therefore the conclusion would be the same, although in view of the fact that Mr. Stanišić feels that he's too ill, that you should give him the benefit of the doubt for that purpose.
The only change in opinion would be the benefit of the doubt at this point.
Yes. Then you said he's not fit to be transported. Is that for the reasons of physical illness?
For physical reasons.
Yes. And would that be the herniated disc which causes the problem, and together with the colitis?
At this moment, the colitis is a big problem. I'd like to point out he has lower back pain, but it's not based on herniation at this moment. That has been excluded.
Yes, and no other cause has been established at this moment. Could you explain to me why it was, how I have to understand that it was possible to transport Mr. Stanišić from Belgrade to The Hague, where apparently transportation is not in any way possible between the UNDU and the tribunal's premises where we are at this moment?
The back pain got much worse after on his arrival here. I did not examine him beforehand, but that is the reason at this moment. That's also the reason why we're planning a rehabilitation program as a physiotherapist.
Yes, and you earlier reported that he had refused physiotherapeutical treatment. No start has yet been made. Has he approved already to be treated by a physiotherapist?
I just got the report in, so I do not know if he has agreed or not.
So matter is as it was before, that he had not given his consent up till this moment.
Yes.
You said you did not examine Mr. Stanišić before he left Belgrade. What's then the exact basis for the observation that the back pain has become far worse?
Well, I did I was present on his arrival at Schiphol, and the way he walked out the plane with some difficulties, but not the difficulties he's showing here.
Yes, and at present, walking, moving around, is that... Can he get up?
It's still very limited. As far as we can see, it's getting a bit more often, but
Yes.
still very limited.
Could he, that we do not find that in the report, could he, for example, walk to the video link room?
No, he claims not to be able to. I cannot check it, but I assume he is not able to walk to the video conference room.
What's the
But a
distance?
wheelchair, well, it's only about 20-30 meters to the lift, and then about 10 meters here.
Yes. Now, it's your observation that you think he would not be able to go there. As the parties are aware, the Chamber has, I think, informed the parties that the Chamber would seek additional information when needed. From the information we received, and that's now put on the record, it was observed that Mr. Stanišić can move to a cell for smoking. Could you explain to us why you consider him not to be able to go to the video link cell, whereas he is apparently able to go to a smoking cell and stay there for a while to smoke?
Well, in fact, it is not, from my point of view, important if he can walk it or not, as he has been provided a wheelchair. So he can be brought to the video conference room without any problems. So his walking capacity is not a factor in the being able to be present in the video teleconference room.
That may be true. It's not an answer to my question.
Sorry.
Is he moving to the smoking cell
I'm not
by
aware
using
of it.
you're not aware of that? Has it been considered to, for transportation purposes, to find solutions, for example, transport in a more horizontal position rather than normally be seated on a chair in a vehicle?
I'm not aware of. That question has never been put to me, so I cannot answer it at the moment.
Yes. So therefore your conclusion that he's not fit to be transported could also depend on the conditions of transportation. Is that correctly understood?
That is correct.
Thank you for those answers. A final question to you. You said he would be able to participate in proceedings up to 1 hour. How much time of rest would you consider appropriate before resuming? Would that be half an hour, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour? Could you?
This is always very difficult. It's always more or less a guess. I think after a recovery period of 1 hour, you could proceed further.
Yes. Thank you for your answers. I have no further questions for you. Mr. Groom.
Would it be possible for me to ask a follow-up question for a matter that arose during Your Honour's questioning of Dr. Eckhoff?
Yes, please do.
Doctor, when Judge Ori was asking you some questions about Mr. Stanišić, you were describing what you're characterizing as increased lower back pain. Now, looking at a report that was filed on the 15th of May, it seemed that an MRI did not reveal any underlying organic reason for the back pain. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So am I correct in saying that your characterization of the level of back pain is based upon Mr. Stanisić's own reports that the back pain is becoming worse? Is that correct?
In the case of lower back pain without herniations, it's the only thing we can rely on as a doctor.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'm looking at the parties. I don't think that we need the further presence and assistance of Dr. Akoff. That being confirmed, Dr. Akoff, I'd like to thank you very much for making yourself available, and we'll close the video link. At least I can't see you anymore. Thank you. Mr. Knoops, you announced that you'd make an application.
Your Honor, Mr. Jordaš will file the application.
Yes. Mr. Jordaš, could you give us any impression on how much time you need for that?
5 to 10 minutes.
Please proceed.
The application is for an adjournment of today's hearing and tomorrow's hearing in order to have Mr. Stanišić seen and diagnosed by Dr. Deman. We rely upon both Dr. Akoff, who, as Your Honours know, recommends that such a diagnosis should take place, and we rely upon the report from Dr. Petrovic, which buttresses that suggestion. The report is dated the 10th of May 2009, and as Your Honours know, indicates that Mr. Stanisić's overall psychological functioning has worsened, and so we submit the same benefit of the doubt that Dr. Akoff gave to the accused exists and will continue to exist until a psychiatrist, and preferably Dr. Deman, because he's the one who has the history and a clearer picture of Mr. Stanišić over a long period of time, before he has seen him, the court in our submission will be returned again and again to this same debate, which is Dr. Akoff, as a general practitioner, coming to conclusions which undoubtedly are well thought out from his perspective, but coming to conclusions which he himself caveats constantly with, we ought to have the benefit of a specialist. I might be wrong, is the subtext to his detailed but caveated opinion. And in our submission, this situation to a large degree has existed for some time. We had a report from Dr. Deman dated the 19th of March, which led to the prosecution's application to recall Mr. Stanisić for further treatment for diagnosis at the Peter Baum Center in Amsterdam. Your Honours, returned Mr. Stanišić to detention, and since that time, Mr. Stanišić has only seen Dr. Petrović. That is the only psychiatric diagnosis which he has had since that time. And there is no evidence on the record from a psychiatrist since Mr. Stanisić's recall which has indicated anything other than there is a serious problem. And we accept, of course, that Mr. Stanišić declined the offer, but we would submit that's a reasonable position to take in relation to someone who is ill, whether that is a minor physical illness which has been ongoing for some time, or whether, in the case of Mr. Stanišić, it's a serious and long-standing psychiatric condition. It makes sense, we submit, for Mr. Stanišić to see a psychiatrist who is fully cognizant of the history. And it makes sense, we submit, and it's realistic for Mr. Stanišić to say, well, I'd rather not describe the inner recesses of my mind and my depression to a new person. And so we submit every single pointer is suggesting more information is needed before Your Honours could rule that the trial at this stage should proceed. We are not asking for an adjournment of several months, simply these 2 afternoons so that Dr. Deman can visit, diagnose, and then when we return to court, we're all, and particularly Your Honours, in a better position to decide what to do, and to decide if those veiled suggestions concerning Mr. Stanisić's reluctance to come to court are in fact justified, or in fact the diagnosis supports his position that he's not well enough to come to court or attend the video conferencing room. Those are my submissions.
Thank you, Mr. Jordaš. Mr. Groom, do you want to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. With respect to Mr. Jordaš's submissions, a couple of observations. Once again, I think we're running into a problem that arose last year, and I think it's starting to make itself quite apparent here, is this conflation of the assessing of Mr. Stanišić and the treatment of Mr. Stanišić. Mr. Stanišić and Dr. Mann, they've never had a therapeutic relationship. Dr. Mann was a court-appointed expert asked to give his professional opinion about Mr. Stanišić. It may be true that Mr. Stanišić needs some psychiatric treatment, and it may be true that if Dr. Petrović can only see him what seems to be at intervals of 6 weeks, that he may need more than that. And certainly if it's the assessment of Dr. Falke and Dr. Eckhoff that he would benefit from more regular and predictable psychiatric therapy, the prosecution certainly would have no opposition to that. But it's clear that Dr. Deman is not the person to be doing that if he is to maintain his position as a court-appointed expert to give his professional opinion and his assessment about Mr. Stanišić to Your Honors. I must take issue with what Mr. Jordaš is putting forward now as he's jumping or asking the chamber to draw the conclusion that Dr. Eckhoff's suggestion that it may be a good idea to ask Dr. Deman to look at Mr. Stanišić as undermining his own conclusion. And I would draw the chamber's attention to page 9 of today's transcript, beginning at line 19, where when Mr. Knups put this proposition to Dr. Eckhoff, he said, quote, "It is normal, even if we know the diagnosis, even if we are quite sure in our profession to seek the advice from specialists." I submit that Dr. Eckhoff's suggestion that it might be beneficial to have Dr. Deman's view on it is not him expressing any doubt in his own opinion, which we have in his report dated from today, in which he says, quote, there are no evident psychiatric reasons preventing him from participating in proceedings, end quote. It is simply a statement of Dr. Eckhoff of what any careful and prudent physician would say when an expert might be invited to participate in an assessment. I believe that there is a sufficient basis, Your Honor, on all of the evidence that's before you to suggest that Mr. Stanišić can participate in proceedings today, and that the prosecution submits that we should move forward. I'd also ask, before I sit down, for the Chamber to consider, it seems clear that Mr. Stanišić could be brought in a wheelchair to the video conference link, if the Chamber has any doubt about this, to give some consideration to whether it might not be prudent to have Mr. Stanišić brought so the Chamber can make its own assessment of his state of mind and his ability to participate. And finally, Your Honor, I would just say that what was on the agenda today is the opening of the prosecution. And that is somewhat different from every other aspect of the trial, and that is really the one part of the trial where there is no active participation by an accused. The opening that I am going to give today is in substantial part similar to the one I gave a year ago, that Mr. Stanišić has had over a year to discuss it with his attorney. It's quite possible for the Chamber, or I would even request that the Chamber consider issuing an order requiring a video copy of the opening be provided to Mr. Stanišić within 48 hours of the opening, so he could again sit down with Mr. Stanišić, Mr. Knups, and Mr. Jordash and fully discuss this. And also, the opening is a mere expounding on the pretrial brief, which Mr. Stanišić has had in his possession for approximately 2 years. So there really is no active role for Mr. Stanišić to play. As far as the content of the opening, that could be given to him fully by this evening or tomorrow. So I submit, Your Honor, that there really is no basis for us not proceeding today with the prosecution opening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groom. Mr. Jordash.
May I briefly respond, yes, please? Thank you. My learned friend makes several suggestions, noting that Dr. Eckhoff is merely being prudent, and that Your Honours might equally be prudent by having the accused brought to court in a wheelchair. So we're really not arguing about much. We both agree that it would be prudent to obtain further information about Mr. Stanisić's condition. Now, in our submission, before we start to bring somebody who potentially may be seriously psychiatrically ill to court in a wheelchair, we ought to take the suggestion which has been made by the Dr. Eckhoff, which is the prudent suggestion that we have a psychiatric assessment, and sooner rather than later. And prudent is the right way, because we are talking about a major war crimes case about to start, and prudent suggests that we should be sure, if there is a viable and relatively straightforward way of satisfying ourselves or the court's minds as to Mr. Stanisić's illness. And my learned friend makes the further suggestion that, well, it's the opening statement and therefore not much will happen and we can give the opening statement to the accused tomorrow. But we're back to the same place. If it's prudent to require further diagnosis, prudent for Your Honours to see the accused, it's prudent to assume that whatever mental condition Mr. Stanišić might be suffering will not entirely allow him to read the opening tomorrow. So it matters not whether we take the opening in a bundle of paper or we try to have Mr. Stanišić listen to it on a video conferencing system. If he's ill, and we won't know that until we take in our submission this next step. Those are our submissions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, if I may add, the prosecution, as you may recall, last Tuesday I was standing here. I made the suggestion to the court. I said we are back in the same position as last year if we don't learn a lesson from the past, i.e. that we recall a psychiatrist for evaluation. I recall that Mr. Groom was supporting my submission. You honors can remember that. Mr. Groom was supporting my submission that we should have a psychiatric evaluation before the start of the case. Now today the prosecution apparently changed their mind, but we as defense, we have alerted the chamber to the situation that it is absolutely also from the perspective of efficiency of this case worthwhile to have this evaluation in place before the start of the case. And I think it's important to notify the court that the same prosecution today apparently changed their mind, while Dr. Eekhoff's report is actually more in support of our submissions than last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groom.
I just wouldn't want my silence to be misinterpreted as misunderstood as consent. The point that I simply made last week, and I think I discussed it with the chamber, and the chamber responded, is just the prosecution continues to view it as essential that the treatment and the assessment be separated. So I don't oppose whatever assessments are done. That's not the same as saying that I believe that we need to stop proceedings for that assessment process. I was simply saying to the chamber I thought that it was imperative that as soon as possible we have a completely independent assessment procedure established.
Thank you, Mr. Groom. We'll adjourn for I think in Latin one says if it's for a longer period of time sine die, but I would say sine hora, which means the time the chamber will need to decide whether the application should be granted or not. We do not know yet, but let's say that we'll certainly not resume before 20 minutes to 4 o'clock.
All rise. We have